Hi, folks. It's May 9th. This is our week one go-to session for DFM301 Cinematography 2. I'm your instructor, Mike Walsh, and welcome to Cinematography 2. Tonight, I have just a discussion for you about adapting lenses to your Sony digital video camera. I think at this time all of you should be using the Sony FS5. There may be a couple of you that have the FS700. That's possible. And then there may be a few of you, some outliers, that are using things like the Panasonic GH4. In fact, I just had a student last month whose tool of choice was the Panasonic GH4 DSLR camera, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, for its size and ease of portability and adaptability to some of his camera supports, namely his DJI Ronin gimbal support. So whatever camera you are using at this point, I just wanted to talk to you about lenses and thinking outside the box. Your Sony FS5, I'll assume that all of you are operating with the FS5 at this point. That camera is what we refer to as a single chip or a large chip capture device. And one of the beauties of digital video is now that we're using a single large chip instead of an array of chips like we did in the old days of the CCD or the charged coupled device. Video cameras that used 3 chips, the chips were anywhere from 1/3 of an inch to 2/3 of an inch, and they came in an array of 3, each capturing one of the 3 additive primaries, red, blue, or green, from our lighting primary color spectrum. And now the capture devices are single chip situations that capture all 3 colors in each of the pixel sites on the capture device. So that's kind of a neat bit of technology that allows us to do some pretty special things. And one of those things is that we can adapt just about any lens that we might have laying around to our camera and shoot through it and see what kind of results we get. I don't have an FS5 with me this evening, but I do have, this is a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. And I don't know if you can see the capture device inside there, but this is what we call an active micro four thirds mount. You can see the electronic contacts down here that translates lens information and metadata to the video file as we capture it live. And your Sony camera has a very similar chip inside of it on an NEX Sony mount. Sometimes they call it the E mount or the A mount, depending on which camera you're using. But the Sony NEX mount is basically what you have on your FS5. And the beauty of that is there will be lenses that are native to that mount on that camera, like your kit zoom, for instance, that came with your camera. In this case, Blackmagic doesn't make lenses, so lenses from, for instance, Panasonic with active micro four thirds mount will mount natively to this camera, just like your kit lens will mount natively to your Sony FS5. Now, that in itself isn't that interesting. But the additional options that we have now because of single source capture is that we're not limited anymore to the lenses that are native to this particular mount. What we have available to us nowadays are a variety of interesting adapters that we can utilize to conform almost any lens you can think of to our video camera. And here's a couple of versions right here. As you can see, they're a little bit different in their design and function. This adapter is designed to take a lens that originally, where's that Olympus lens? Here we go. Lens that originally went on a 35mm still camera, and it will adapt it to the active micro four thirds mount that's on my Blackmagic pocket camera. Now, one of the things that makes a lens for an Olympus film camera different than a lens made for the Panasonic, or I'm sorry, the Blackmagic pocket camera would be the depth of the lens mount in relationship to the capture device. A lens like the Olympus that's meant for a film camera has a much deeper focal distance between the center, the optical center of this lens, and the film plane inside of the camera. That's different than the distance from this capture device. You can see the depth here to the flange of the micro four thirds. So what we have to do is make up the difference by adding an adapter that has a depth to it that will reintroduce some of that focal distance that this lens is used to utilizing on a camera with a shallower sensor placement inside the mount. And it's pretty easy. This this mount, you can order it online. This is a photodiox. Actually, I got the wrong one here. It's a photodiox. We call these dumb adapters because they are basically an extension tube. But there is the appropriate mount here, relevant to the lens we want to use, in this case an Olympus lens, and the micro four thirds mount here. Now you can see that the adapter doesn't have any electronics on it at all. That's why we call it a dumb adapter. And our active micro four thirds mount has all these electronic contacts down here. Now, the ramifications of using this adapter are that the lens will no longer transmit any information, assuming that it was even capable in the first place, which this lens is not, by the way. You don't get any translation of information from the lens to the camera like you would with a lens created in this time period, technologically speaking. You can see how the lens here, the Panasonic lens, has all these contacts on it, so that information that is generated while this lens is being used translates into the camera, and that becomes metadata on your video file. Well, an Olympus lens that was built in 1985 to be used on a film camera is not going to have that kind of electronic relationship because the cameras themselves didn't have electronics that created metadata because we were shooting film. But this lens is still a very viable choice, and it has some very unique properties that we might like to utilize on our Blackmagic pocket camera, or in your case on your Sony FS5. So what we'll do is we'll take our photodiox Olympus OM mount to micro four thirds, and we will conform our Olympus 50mm 1.4 lens to it, like so. And then we will take our new construct and we will mount it to our pocket camera, hopefully. Whoops. oh, you know what? This camera is too shallow for this adapter. That doesn't want to play well. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Okay. Sorry about that. Now, what we've done is we've attached our Olympus 50mm 1.4 lens that was built in. Actually, this one was built further back than that. I can tell by the silver ring on the front of this. This lens was built in about 1975, 1980. This Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera obviously has only been out since maybe 2015, maybe 2014. So this is relatively new technology, and this technology has been around for several decades now. But we can make the two work together with the addition of this adapter. Now, this was a still photographic lens, so it was designed to be used manually like so on a film camera that you had to advance the film, focus, adjust your f-stops, and shoot to take pictures. Well, now we're shooting video. So we have some ways to adapt a lens like this to a camera like this, or we have lenses that are designed to be used cinematically with video products like the Blackmagic camera, and still be from this era of technology, and we can make use of the vintage glass, we call it, the coating formulations, or the particular lens characteristics that a lens made in 1975 might give us, like a certain kind of flaring, or a certain color tone, or a certain kind of contrast that's very unique to, say, an Olympus 50mm 1.4 that was made in 1975, and we can inject another layer of complexity to our photography, which is kind of cool. I have some stuff here, like for instance, I have the Contax 50mm 1.4, the equivalent lens to my Olympus, in a Carl Zeiss 50mm 1.4. This lens was made in about 1985, but still in an age that was pre-electronic contacts. This has a flange adapter on it, like this one, that goes from Yashica Contax, which is the native mount on this lens, to Canon EF. So I can put this on a Canon 5D, for instance, or my Blackmagic production 4K camera, and use this vintage Carl Zeiss lens on a camera like that. I've also got a lens here by WK1, which is called a cinema lens, and you can see there's a little bit of difference between a 50mm T15 cinema lens and a Zeiss 50mm 1.4 still photographic lens. There's a difference of size, and there's a difference in features of construction between these two lenses. My WK1 50mm, for instance, has a native Canon EF mount built into it, and it is not electronic. But the lens has adjustable f-stops, and it has manual focus. And you'll notice that it has this knurled, what we call a lens gear here, or a pitch gear, and it's also on the f-stop ring, and that is designed to aid us in focusing the lens when we use a remote focusing system like this Fotka here that I have built into this rig. This is a Z camera. I have a Canon EF focal reducer on a active micro four thirds mount capture device right here. You can see here's my chip in here. Here's my active micro four thirds mount, and I have a lens adapter and focal reducer in here. You can see there's an optic inside, and what it does is helps to reduce some of the reproduction ratio of a lens that is designed to work on a larger format camera with a camera that has a smaller sensor in it. Okay, and if I pop this focal reducer back on, what it'll do is instead of my lens having a reproduction ratio that is something like 1.6 or 2 to 1, it will reduce the relationship to something like 1.3, 1.4 to 1. And so I could take my Rokinon Cinema Prime with my Canon EF mount on it, and I can now mount it onto my Z1 camera. And those knurled gears that are there, you can see them here, the f-stop gear and the focus gear, and they're designed to marry up to this little guy here, which is called a follow focus. And what it does, riding on the rods down there, is it will marry up to the focus gear and help me turn the lens so I can expedite focus, not from holding the lens out in front of me and having to look at the barrel, but I can position the camera so I can look at the viewfinder back here, and I can focus my lens out here like so, and that's how I operate this rig, which is kind of interesting. And then of course I have my matte box, which can sort of marry up right there, and we can use our filters. We can pop filters into the filter trays, and we can affect filtration on the lens and so forth by adapting a cinema product like a cinema lens to a small capture device like a Z1 camera. And we can do the same things with our Blackmagic, and you can do the same thing with your Sony FS5. For instance, let's just imagine that you had some reason why you wanted to use one of these Zeiss 50mm lenses here on your Sony camera. All you've got to do is find the lens that you want to play with. Maybe you've got some. Maybe your folks have an old camera in the closet down in the hallway, and you bust it open and you find a Zeiss 50mm 1.7 in there on their old Contax camera that they haven't used in 20 years because it shoots film, and they're onto their little pocket digital camera. And you can take this guy and you can take an adapter designed to go from Yashica Contax mount, which is what this has on it, to an active Sony NEX mount on the other side. And you could take this guy and you could mount him to your Sony FS5, and you could experience shooting with a Zeiss 50mm vintage lens on your Sony camera with the appropriate adapter. And that's kind of fun. And then what you need is some way to effectively focus this lens when it's attached to your camera. Now you could either do it manually by hand, or you can build out your camera with a rod system, something like what I did with the Sony, the Z camera, okay, with a matte box and a follow focus. And all you need to do to conform that Zeiss product to that rod system is something like this. And what these things are, these nifty little gadgets, are pitch gears. And they're designed to mount onto our lenses like so. And you can see on this one, for instance, it's got a a little screw on the top, and you basically screw these two ends together, and you can focus this lens now via the lens gear, and these teeth will match up to the focus assist that I just showed you on the Rokinon lens, and effectively this becomes a cinema operable 50mm lens for your Sony camera. So there's lots of fun stuff you can do playing around with auxiliary lenses on your camera. So this week when you're watching some of the tutorials that I have arranged for you, like the Cinderella Man demonstration by Imagine Entertainment and Ron Howard and DP Salvatore Totino, and we talk about different lenses and cinema primes on the film cameras. Remember that you can do the same thing on your Sony FS5. So it becomes a really fun and experimental way of shooting video digitally on your Sony camera. All you need are pitch gears, lenses you want to play with, maybe a focus assist or a rod system like this one here. These are very inexpensive and available online through Amazon or eBay. This company happens to be Fotka, which is a quality manufacturer that makes relatively inexpensive accessories that you can adapt to your Sony FS5. I have a rather in-depth video coming out very soon on cinema lenses and adapting them to the Sony camera. So you might be on the lookout for that when it hits the YouTube channel. I'll let you guys know. So lots of fun, lots of potential, and thinking outside that box, right? Don't take anything at face value. Just because you got a kit zoom on that FS5 doesn't mean that that's all you're going to be able to do. There are so many different ways of adapting technologies to your camera, to your existing camera. All you need is a little imagination, some tutorials to help you through the tough technical spots, and then time to experiment. And you may be surprised some of the results that you can achieve with some very inexpensive and very simple tools that are readily available to you, and they're a click away on the internet. So think about that. Let me know what you think about this video. Let me know how you like the Cinema Primes video that's coming out soon. And give me some feedback off the LMS after you've done your read and view tutorials for the week. Check out the Cinderella Man demonstration. That'll be the basis of your discussion post this week. And let's start thinking about lenses, and let's try to think about them in a little bit more depth. And let's realize that we really aren't limited by our technology. In fact, we are liberated by it. And there are so many things that we can do now to make our cameras more expressive, more creative, more interesting, more technically complex. And our images are all the better for it. So I hope you enjoyed this little talk, and I will see you around the LMS. If you have any questions, as usual, you can email me. I will respond back to you. You can use my Google Voice, leave me a message, and I will get back to you. Have a good evening. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.